Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101, and yes, it is yet another one of these white on dark cardstock applications of the stamps and media. I had just done a stamp-along video using the Country Chapel Nature Set number 7, and I was thinking about doing another project with that one before I kind of put it away. And I started thinking about this mountain back here and how it would look kind of cool if I stamped it out in like white ink. And I was thinking about doing that over, a colored scene, but just stamping that one image out in white. But then I thought, alright, I've been playing around with a lot of these scenes or images on black paper. Alright, now there's a lot of tight detail in the Country Chapel image. Alright, right here, there's a lot of tone and value and tightly stippled areas in here, and I was wondering what that would look like in this white on black application, not knowing if it would be just too muddled looking. Alright, so I wanted to play around with that and experiment and see, and lo and behold, it was really muddled and kind of not clearly defined, which it didn't come as any surprise to me. Because, when I design these stamps, they're really meant to be stamped out in some kind of dark color on a light background. And we're talking about the exact opposite with this. It's not going to be too much of a big deal if it's like this, it's like some branch, If you just stamp it out in white, no big deal. But when you're talking about values where there's a lot of tight stippling in an area of a design to represent shadows, and then you're stamping it out in white ink on black, it's like the complete opposite type of look. But I've known that, or I know that from some of these recent experiments, that you can kind of bring back and redefine imagery outlines from the background with the use of like a bleed-proof white, watercolor paint, or things like a white gel pen, okay? So you can see in this card here, it's mostly about the application of that paint in there. It's done in the highlights, it's done on the rooftop, it's done in the windows right in here. Steeple, mountain peaks like that. Treetop right here, anywhere where it's really light, even on some of these little winter twigs, and on some of those little rock textures down there. But that really, and you don't have to outline everything. If you just kind of put some highlights here and there, like on that column, these columns right here, it's just a little line going up them. You can really give this suggestive look to a lot of these scenes in terms of redefining the forms, okay? Like I don't color in everything on that tree right here, or everything on this tree. This one right here, I left the right side of it largely blank, okay? Most of it is on the upper left-hand side, You can really bring things out, and I think things look fairly dimensional, given what we're working with. It doesn't look like super deep space, but it looks, it looks like there's depth enough, in my opinion. So it's just a different look, and as dense as these images are, in doing it in this technique, I think we can do just about anything we want to with scenic stamping. Tightly detailed stamping, impressions, just with the use of that white paint to kind of go back in after the impressions are made and just kind of redefine things a little bit. So, and I think it kind of leads to fairly dramatic results. This is a 5 by 7 inch matte black cardstock. Okay. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video if you watch it. I don't know, you can kind of jump ahead and see what these images look like after the composition, and then just jump to the clear end where I'm starting to apply some of this, and you can see how it kind of comes, you know, how it kind of comes about to the final results. I think it's really super fun. And I think there's a lot of other applications for this. At the end of the video I mentioned, you know, if you add these little embellishments in here, like a little rhinestone or a rub-on little star, things like that, that would be kind of interesting. Or if I did like a yellow, you know, gel pen in those windows in there, it would look like a warm tone amongst a otherwise very stark, kind of cool scene. And this is a pre-folded card that I was using, but you can do something where it's like an oval in here. You can cut out a square where it's like framed, and then you open the card this way, and there's the scene right there. So, I don't know, just all kinds of different possibilities here still. It'd be ripe for a word stamp up here or down here. Or if you do that window type thing right here, you can add some other things out here and put, you know, whatever up here. Happy holidays, whatever. Alright, so not only a fun scene to do, but I think a pretty good foundation for other types of embellishments, word stamps, or kind of a format for whatever kind of card you want to make. Alright, thanks for tuning in again. Hope you enjoy it. Okay. I've been doing a little experimentation lately, or a lot of it, and I was looking at the set that I just used in the Stamp-Along video, and it's the Nature Set number 7, the Country Chapel set. And I was looking at the stamps today, thinking maybe I should do one more video using this set while I have it out. And then I started thinking about what would this set look like, kind of in the black, white on dark process, using pigment ink, white pigment ink over black cardstock. And in the spirit of that type of curiosity and experimentation and expanding on kind of what I've been learning, I thought I would try that on this cardstock. So this is a 5x7 pre-folded card, okay, but you can use any kind of dark cardstock for this technique here. You can see I already stamped out one impression of this on black because I started this video and I started doing it before, but I forgot to turn on this external microphone that I have now that gives these videos a little bit better sound than just the in-camera microphone. So I find that I'm doing that lately. I'm forgetting to turn on everything. So anyway, so I'm starting over again. But one of the things I'm doing is I'm making sure that with this Colorbox Frost White pigment ink, you can use other brands as well. Brilliance would be good too. But these sponges on these pads are really quite soft. And then the ink in these is basically like thick paint, you know. So you want to make sure that when you're doing that, especially in high detailed imagery like this, all right, like this image, see all those little tiny dots in there in that stippling technique. You don't want it to puddle up in there, okay, in those tight details. So kind of be a little bit careful about inking up your impressions. When it's something more spindly like this that doesn't have a lot of super tight detail like around on the branches, you don't need to worry about it. And this only applies to if you have like a really super juicy pigment ink pad, like a, you know, fairly new one. Actually, some of mine aren't fairly new. I just you know, I just don't use my white pigment ink pads as far as a huge amount of the ink off of it. I use them all the time for that kind of frosty, foggy look in my scenes. But it's almost like a dry brush effect with a, you know, little cotton swab, so I'm not using up a lot of the ink out of it at any given time, or over really a series of years. I've only had to re-ink one of these pads once, and one of the pads is probably 15 years old, so. But the one that I just use is kind of a medium dry, so it works perfectly for me right out of the pad. But light dabbing, you know, on images with a lot of detail. Okay, so speaking of a lot of detail, that means there's a lot of surface area, so I'm standing up and I'm giving this good pressure so that it impresses over the entire card. All right, we have a kind of a grayscale image. It looks kind of weird to me, but we'll see what it looks like with the additional embellishments on it. I think I can bring out those windows a little bit more with some white ink or white paint. And that's what I'm finding kind of in this entire process. Things look okay. I mean, you can emboss this too, and it'll be like really white, and you don't have to worry about any of this other technique. But I like the dual tone techniques that are kind of being achieved with the use of white ink or paint over the tops of these images like that. So I'm utilizing the kind of more translucent properties of this impression to, you know, to take full advantage of, you know, of what's been given, so to speak. All right, but I don't know. That being said, it might be kind of interesting to emboss that, and I can do another impression in the background. Maybe it's gray. Maybe that would look like it's kind of more dimensional in terms of the values. Darker things. Not always, but sometimes they recede, or just different values of things. Imagery can represent different depths. It's not always values, sometimes it's intensity, you know, brighter things in the foreground, duller things in the background. Sometimes it's lighter things in the background, like where you're looking through, you know, some fog or something like that, haze in the air, being illuminated by light, distant objects, you know, like a green tree. Doesn't look so green, it looks kind of pale and washed out, you know, so it kind of recedes. Okay, rocky peaks. I'm wondering if I should wipe off some of this bottom. I'm wondering if the same kind of techniques apply to this. If I take off some of this on the bottom, then it won't stamp out quite as white as where there's thicker paint. Okay, so I'm wiping off a good amount down here. This is all kind of new to me, or a lot of it is. I'm stamping this in the background. This will be kind of a good compare contrast project with the previous video, the stamp along. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. See how that kind of fades out at the bottom and it comes into those trees. These things stamp out with kind of a different opacity, don't they? Like up there, that's a lot whiter than these ones right here. I don't know why. Maybe there was more ink on the mountain, I'm not sure. Okay, let's see what we can do. I'm not going to do the exact same composition as yesterday's, but, you know, it'll be similar. This, for one thing, is a 5x7. Yesterday's was a a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This might be interesting. I'm making the card like this. Actually, yeah. I'm wondering if I should... If I stamp this across the crease, there's going to be some imagery missing right down the middle because this is a pre-crease card. Maybe that won't look so good. So maybe I'll fold this over and we'll just keep that backside clean. Otherwise it would be kind of cool. So if you're working on a bigger piece of paper, and if you're following along with me, maybe just leave it, fold it open, and you can kind of stamp this where it's going on the front and back, if you wish. Alright, so let's go with this one right here. This is the tree cluster. Gotta find where there's a certain part of my pen that's juicier than the other. Gotta find kind of an even spot. Maybe I'll go this way as well. Looks like that side right up here is really super wet. I think. Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's a mystery. Alright. It looks like some of it could have puddled up in there. I'm not quite sure. So I'll give it light. Well, it's firm, but it's just not, you know, I'm not squashing this image down into there. And I'll put this tree right here. It'll be a little bit forward from the chapel. I'll overlap it a little bit. Depending on how light this stamps out, will determine if it looks like it's in front of or behind the chapel. Because I'm stamping it a little bit lower, it should be in front though. But we'll see if these trees merge in. If they don't, I'll just bring out the trees a little bit lighter with the use of some of that white paint. But we'll see. Yeah, it looks okay. See how it's stamped out lighter like that? I wonder if it's because it's... Well, maybe it's... I think there was just more ink on it. It's kind of interesting. And I like it, so I'm going to go with one more. Alright, this should stamp ink up a little bit faster because I already have some ink on there. Okay. I know these videos aren't the most dynamic thing, watching someone ink up a stamp. Okay, let's see, I'll stamp it about like so. Don't always have to use the whole stamp, the whole impression, the whole form of it on a piece of paper. It can always be kind of coming off from the side, which is the beauty of scenic stamping, nature stamps. I wonder if I hold this on a little bit longer, if the ink will tend to transfer more. We'll see. Interesting, where the pigment ink does overlap previous impressions of pigment ink, it does look lighter because I can see this line right here. Okay, so we'll even that up with some more paint that we apply. Alright, so it's looking kind of interesting so far. It looks kind of weird too because of that country chapel image. Remember, everything's in reverse, you know, it's really been conceived to be used in black, so on lighter paper, so we're talking about, you know, the exact opposite of its, you know, conceived purpose, but, you know, we're seeing if how these stamps work for, you know, we're testing them out for the range of kind of applicable, you know, uses, just in terms of the imagery so far. And I don't know, I've been pretty pleased with them. so far in these light on dark tests. Okay, this is the sedge filler. I'm going to blot off some of this tone around the edges just so maybe it, when I stamp out multiple impressions of it, I think it'll blend in a little bit better doing it that way. Okay. Okay, just kind of giving the surface a little bit of continuity with some additional texture. This sedge filler is one of my favorite images in terms of usage. Okay. I think I'll just leave that just black in there, like about like so. Oh, I didn't use the path on this one. I thought, let's not go reverse out with that. Okay, and one of my favorite little stamps is also the little tiny rocks. I like I don't know if I called it tiny rocks large. The other one could be just called tiny rocks. It seemed weird calling something tiny rocks large. Tiny rocks small is even kind of weird. But you know, I had to differentiate the two, and they both look like, you know, tiny little rocks. Just one's bigger than the other. But they both add a really great variation in texture to whatever you're doing. I even stamp it right on over, you know, my grass a lot of times. Alright, so there we go. And I have this, a couple winter twig images. I think this one's the winter twig small. Alright, kind of filling out the base area here a little bit. I was looking at this mountain up here and I was wondering if I should make another kind of row of mountains in the background. Yeah, maybe that would be too much. I could though. You could build up more, you know, peaks in the background by kind of stacking them, inking it up, wiping off the base, stamping it back here, and then you'll have this kind of this haze that it's kind of coming out of, leading the viewer's eye farther back in space from a visual standpoint. I mean, it's all two-dimensional really, but okay, so let's take a look here. And let's think about some lighting in here. Let's bring out these trees from the back, foreground a little bit more. Put some highlights on here, highlights on these peaks in the back, I think for drama's sake. Maybe we'll bring out this chapel a little bit too, the front of it. Alright, so I'm going to use my bleed-proof white on this one. I really love using this paint. See, my brush here is all crusted and hard, but if I just add a little bit of water and rinse that off, it'll be fine. I just have one of my little palettes here. Tap water. I don't use too much, other than tap water with my supplies, because I think everything that I use is water soluble. Okay, so see, my brush is nice and the hairs are nice and free from that crusty dried ink. Paint. The bleed-proof white really goes back into solution beautifully. So, if you're lazy like me and you don't clean off your brush right after you use it with this bleed-proof white, you don't need to worry about it. A little bit of water, and it's ready to go. Okay, let's see what we can do here. The chapel looks a little bit kind of undefined because there's so much detail in there, and I already have a lot of detail applied to it for the purpose of stamping it out on black on white, or black on light. So it's kind of weird working in reverse on an image like this, where there's so much definition everywhere. Suddenly things that are supposed to represent shadows are suddenly the lightest areas because all that, dark area is now light. So we'll see what we can do with it. Okay, now I think I'm just going to start off on some of these peaks here, and some of those lighter areas. Maybe I'll just add a little bit of white paint to represent light hitting the peaks. Maybe could be, well, it is light, but it could be more snow, maybe, perhaps something like that. I'm kind of going with this little brush stroke. I wanted to see what that would look like. Kind of keeping the strokes of the brush very apparent. See if it'll add kind of a nice textural appearance to it. Okay, now I'm going to go into these windows of the chapel, and I'm going to attempt to lighten them up a little bit, hopefully giving the appearance that it's night and there's a light from within. I'll see something like that. Now, let's see, I need to really define the rooftop of this, okay? I think I'll go down like, well, maybe kind of define the roof a little bit. I'm adding quite a bit to it, so I'm going to have to do the same thing kind of all over it now. Because I'm saying that there's, by doing that much on there, I'm kind of saying that there's a pretty definitive light shining on it. So let's see what we have to do here. Okay. That's the other part of the rooftop. And maybe I'll kind of bring out some of the silhouette of the kind of the forms on there. Alright, I need a paper towel or something like that. This ink is kind of a little tacky, so and I'm getting it on my hand, so I don't want to smudge things. Would a heat setting, you know, heat gun work well? Yeah. I don't have one out on my desk now, though, so I'm not going to do it. But if you do, go ahead and heat set a little bit before you start kind of adding some of this on. It's kind of coming out from the background now, isn't it, a little bit? I'm not necessarily good with a brush, but after about, I don't know how many cards it's been using this little paintbrush that I have. Maybe 10 or so. I feel that I have a little bit more control over it. You know, practice makes perfect, I guess. Practice, although I'm not perfect, practice for me makes okay, I guess, with this brush. But what I'm also finding is, you know, kind of in the spirit of, I don't know, the paintbrush kind of look or whatever, I'm finding that, you know, I'm used to working with technical pens and being very exact when doing these designs, but I'm finding that if you're not exact with the paintbrush, as long as you kind of keep that same spirit throughout, it really doesn't look bad. In fact, it might look good because there's just a little bit more variation with the paintbrush. There's a certain spirit to it that looks, you know, actually really nice if things aren't dead on, okay? Like this one to me it's looking, I don't know, it's looking kind of more, oh, I don't know, there's a certain charm to it, I guess. It's, I mean, I'm painting on here, but it has the spirit of more like a drawing or sketch. Maybe there's like a element of spontaneity to it. Okay, a steeple. Okay. I think where this one edge ends and the other one begins, like the side of the house. I think we can use a little bit more definition between those two spots. So right here on the front panel, what I'll do is I'll put some highlights. Okay, it's definitely, with these touches here, it's giving the chapel definitely a more rustic type of look, you know, to it. It looks more like wood. It's almost looking like a wood block print in some ways. I mean, maybe not really, but... Alright, now there's some windows on the side, and I'm just wondering if I dare... paint those white. And I say yes. Let's do it. And what I'm painting is I'm painting it where it's black, you know, because it's stamping out in the opposite. So, right, so that's what it looks like right there. It's kind of consistent with the you know, the lighting, interior lighting of the front. Okay, so we have that mountain chapel. Alright, now we need to do that with some of these trees. We need to put some kind of snow or something, or just, you know, these highlights in this tree, or in the trees. Might as well do all of them. But you don't have to do them everywhere, okay? Okay, I'm going to weight this lighting on this tree a little bit heavier on the interior here, or on the left-hand side. I'm not going to put too much of this on the right-hand side of it. Just to kind of, you know, define some line. I'm saying that lighting is coming from, I don't know, here. I guess it could be just directly over, but maybe the lighting will be a little bit, you know, to the left of the scene as far as the light source, okay? So, this trunk down here, man, my stomach is really growling for some reason. I don't think this scene is making me hungry. I'm hoping it's not getting picked up by this new microphone. Okay, see some of these trunks right here. We have that kind of lighting, kind of pops them out from the background a little bit. But I think what this will look good with is a little bit heavier highlights on the tops of this tree. This is what I'm a little bit more gutsy about now, after kind of doing those other black and white ones. I'm a little bit more conservative when I'm doing, or when I have been doing, you know, scenes in color, and then using things like the white gel pen over the top of it. But on these ones, I'm using more of the paint and applying texture. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because, you know, instead of using several layers of, you know, multiple values of a variety of hue, all I really am working with is one thing. So maybe to get that variation, maybe just, I think it looks better with more coverage, maybe. Okay. See this? I'm doing kind of random little dots and effects. It looks really weird. So you have to kind of keep adding that same types of texture over a lot of the imagery, okay? So if you put it on one tree, unless you're doing, you know, avoiding other trees just, you know, for the point of, you know, to make a statement about that tree, want it to really stand out, I would, from a textural standpoint, I would add similar things to, you know, all of the different forms, especially similar forms in the form of additional pine trees. So if you put that technique right here, I would put it over here and here, in other words. Okay? It's kind of fun. And I should note, as I have been on these scenes, it does kind of look funny when you first start doing it. And then you add a little bit more and more, and you know, a certain continuity starts to emerge, starts to reveal itself, and you know, things like this type of effect, it makes a little bit more sense from a lighting perspective. It's consistent, you know, you want some consistency across the scene. Okay, now I'm getting to this side of the piece of paper. I'm going to spin my card upside down so I can get these trees on this side easier, so I don't have to have it all right side up all the time. If it's easier to do it from the other side and to keep the entire process nice and ergonomic and comfortable for your hand. Something like this, if I'm always working upright, you know, my arm might get tired, or my hand, you know, from doing this type of work might start cramping. But if you just kind of position your paper in a position that's suitable for whatever stroke you're going to be using, or for whatever type of application you're using with any type of tool, the scene will come out much more graceful, and it'll be easier on you as a result to have the application be a nice and comfortable one. Alright. I'm getting a little bit more of a thicker paint. It's the same paint, but some of this was really watery in one area, which actually looks good for variation too. But now let me put some of that more watery application over in these areas, again, to keep with a kind of a consistency. And as I start doing this, like I said, I start to get a little bit more bold with the usage of it. So instead of just doing all this one tree and then moving on and on, I kind of go that way, then I come back to it because I keep changing my, you know, the touch a little bit. So I have to go back to my previous trees applications and kind of even them out from a textural standpoint. Okay. There's just a little bit of a peekaboo impression of that tree trunk over here. But let's put a little pigment ink, not pigment ink, the bleed proof white on that. I can do that with these other tree trunks as well here. There's something about the, I don't know, it's looking like a plate. I forget what they call them. It's like, I don't know if it looks like a, it doesn't really look like a silver plate, but I don't know, I'm starting to get this, kind of this engraving, maybe silver, I don't know, it doesn't look like a silver print either, but there's something kind of printmaking looking about this. Okay, I'm hitting these little tiny rocks down here. Not all of them, but hit some with a little bit of this paint. But it does, it feels a little bit like printmaking or something like that. Just in terms of the spirit of it for some reason to me. And when you start applying things like this, there's definitely kind of a hand, application type of spirit to it, just because there's so much of your own kind of brushwork on there. It's like your handwriting or signature. Okay, hitting up some of those winter twigs down below. A few highlights. But after doing these black and white scenes, the more I do, the more of them that I do, I'm really convinced that this, as far as this technique goes, it's far less limited than I would have thought in terms of the type of range that can be achieved. And this one, the imagery is fairly dense, which I thought would have been muddled, which it kind of is if you just, stamp the imagery alone. In this scene, like in, something like this, no big deal, because it's, we're talking about not a deep space of imagery. It's basically a row. There might be a little depth in there, but maybe not too much. Okay. All right, now I've been applying this all over down here. I think the the peaks could stand to use a little bit more now, you know, because there's a ton of texture down below, so why not use a little bit more of this on some of these peaks maybe? It's kind of fun, huh? In terms of the look. Okay, let's go back to our pigment ink. And if you've watched any of the videos that I'm doing, glossy paper techniques, I'm often kind of making the edges of my card, the corners especially, four corners dark. It tends to give a nice vignette to the compositions, and it tends to contain the compositions compositionally for the viewer. It gives it kind of a world unto itself type of look. You know, you're saying that this, you know, the whole thing is like one area, and it's not like this expansive area, and it focuses the viewer's attention on what you want, you know, the viewer to look at, which is some kind of area or areas within the compositions. All right, but it's also because when I make the areas darker, that color, which is usually black, is matching the color that's the darkest within the scene. So I'm usually stamping out something in the compositions in black. All right, so since I stamped this all out in white in that pigment ink, I like to bring in that same vehicle, you know, of white pigment ink into another area of the scene. When I say vehicle, I mean just the device that's been used, you know, in this time it's been white pigment ink, okay, so bringing this in will bring a certain continuity. Don't make this into a gigantic blob. There's ink on here, but it's, you know, fairly dry pad that I'm using, so I'm not applying too much. If you have a big blob on here, blot it off quite a few times, you know, 20 times maybe even, to get a lot of that ink off so that you're applying it in more of a dry brush technique, okay, and touch. Applying it down here gives the appearance of a certain type of mist. And if you look in movies, or TV shows or whatever, when people are walking around in kind of a, you know, wooded area, they're often bringing the smoke machines, you know. So you see this mist in the background. It's beautiful in terms of the lighting for sets. If there's a little bit of a breeze, then you have this kind of motion of this kind of floating light, because moisture reflects the lighting that they're using, so it just makes things look a little bit more lush. Okay, and that's what I'm kind of doing here, or going after with this. Okay. Alright, so a little bit of a kind of a carpet of oscillating mist, fog, okay? And when I say oscillating, I think it looks better to have it kind of here and there than to be covering that whole area down there. It would look kind of weird, I think. Alright, now up in here in the sky, why don't we do the same type of thing up there? Instead of it being kind of a low-lying fog, then we have a little bit of a cloudy look up here, okay? Maybe I'll have it, the mountain kind of, you know, with a little bit of this fog on it, or a cloud. Okay. Maybe it can be rising up from the, some clouds, moisture. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Doesn't have to be all at one elevation. You can kind of put some down here, put some up here. Kind of separated by areas of, you know, none of it, which I think looks better. Okay, again, it's kind of an oscillation of the application. Kind of putting it at the base of the peak kind of gives the peak a little bit more of this feeling of grandeur, like it's poking up from beyond, you know, the cloud level. Now, isn't that fun? You can't tell me that that isn't a fun looking scene. And a first for me. Not in terms of white on black, but the layers of imagery keep getting denser and denser, okay? Now, in theory, I would have thought that all of this just would have merged together, which it kind of did, upon making the impressions, because you're just talking about ink, white ink, one color of ink, okay? And it's not only that, but it's thick paint that you're kind of merging together. But there was enough of a separation, and by adding in those suggestive highlights in there, those highlights can, like right here, it really separates that tree from the distant ones, okay? So, I don't know. I'm getting, a reasonable amount of this illusion of depth in here. I mentioned in another video that it reminds me kind of a bas relief, where it's kind of sculptural, but it's a very shallow sculpture, much like a coin, like those are reliefs on there, okay? But they're very shallow ones. But it gives me that type of feeling when looking at these, just in terms of kind of what this technique can create here with minimal, amounts of media. A few stars in the sky. This area up here, is looking a little bit boring. But you do a few little stars here and there, and it's like pinhole art, It's like little things of light are now shining through. Okay, maybe I'll put a few dots on some trees with the gel pen. You can just use a gel pen too, kind of. It's not going to give you quite the variation of a paintbrush, but it will work. Okay. Now I'm putting some of these little dots down here just to give the sky and another area a little bit more continuity with having a similar texture, okay? Forgot about this tree right here. I could put some on these winter twigs down below. It could represent little crystals of ice or something like that, or that are reflective. They call these little highlights in photographs specular light. It's light that's brighter than white. But they can kind of really bring a scene to life. All right, let's see what we have here. A little bit glary like that, but that's the way it looks. Okay. So, nature set number 7 in a way that, I mean, it might have been done before by someone else, but in a way that I haven't seen these images used before. Totally reversed out, but the way that I added in some highlights, I you know, I kind of redefined a lot of the shapes and forms in here. I mean, I'm just looking at the image, you know, so I'm just kind of staying consistent with it. It looks weird through a great deal of the process because you start adding these little, like, wooden hatchy lines over the, you know, one area, and because it isn't in the rest of the area, it looks kind of strange. But again, if you can just kind of stay consistent with your applications of media, paint, gel pen, or whatever, it all kind of comes together in the end. You know, I don't know if people like this look or not, but it's different, and as far as the process goes, it's certainly fun to do. So, if you like this look, I would really recommend giving this a try. The possibilities are not quite as narrow as I would have thought. I mean, this looks like a, you know, this looks like a scene to me. So, you know those reliefs, or just those pieces of paper that are, I think it is relief. These old-fashioned things that, you know, there's a little bit of dimension to it, but then you have it backlit, and it looks like a more sculptural form, very much more 3D. That's what maybe this type of thing looks like, you know, because it feels like there's a little bit of dimension to it, just with that minimal type of detailing. I don't know, maybe there's less minimal. I put quite a bit of detailing into it, but I don't know. That's what this type of thing I think reminds me of. So, yeah, I don't know. We can make this your Christmas cards, you know, and do you know, 50 of them. I don't know if I would do that, but I don't know. It's certainly fun to do. It'd be kind of fun if you have like a little, like a rhinestone or something like that to put up here, or a rub-on star, or, you know, at the store there's probably little adhesive stars that could be put up here, but what, you know, kind of a North Star up here would be kind of nice, like a little twinkly one with the, like a, how many point is that? 8 point? I don't know how many point star up there, something like that, or right over here. Wouldn't that be really spectacular? Or just something like that. Or, you know, it'd be fantastic, right? Like Happy Holidays, or you stamp that out and you emboss it like in gold or something. Or in white, I guess. I think gold would be kind of nice in this one. Or I have left room down here, you can, you know, put on a separate piece of paper in black and kind of mat it off some sort of holiday greeting down here. So this is kind of your basic, you know, your foundation for, I don't know, other types of embellishment, which would be really fun. So, or on a card like this one right here, if you fold it kind of this way, and you do one of those like oval punches around here, and then you did your Happy Holidays right here, where it has the window looking through to that. Wouldn't that be awesome if you had that, and you opened up right here? So, kind of a nice foundation for, you know, further kind of embellishments or card making possibilities. Hope you enjoyed the scene. I am having a blast experimenting with different usages. Oh, you could have done, you know, here too would be kind of cool. Let's say if I didn't color in those windows with white, or after you color in with white, what you can do is you can do them in yellow. So you just have all this field of white, but then you have this kind of warmer yellow light, like right in those windows there. That would be kind of dramatic too. It's like one of those spot color types of photographs. So, thanks for watching. Happy stamping. And hope you guys kind of find some time to experiment with this. It is too much fun, and it's too much fun to just save for me, you know, to have it all to myself. I know other people have done, you know, white on black before and embossed on black before, but I don't know. Play around with that white paint on there too. It can really lead to some nice effects and a nice final result, and is fun to do.